Welcome to the next podcast from Millinery.Info. I'm your host, Lauren Ritchie, and thank you for joining me for today's episode. Today we welcome Isabelle Soetaerts from the label Isabo Chapo. Isabelle is the winner of the Dutch Hat Association competition in 2022. Thank you so much to our wonderful podcast sponsors for making this episode happen. Best Western Apollo Bay Motel and Apartments, House of Adorn, Hatters Millinery Supplies, Lifted Millinery, Be Unique Millinery, Millinery Australia, Judith M. Millinery Supply House, Hats by Laco, Hat Academy, Louise McDonald Milliner, and Hat Mags. You can find a link to each of these businesses in our show notes. That's either in the podcast app or through our website. If this podcast is something you enjoy listening to and you find it inspirational for your work, I would like to invite you to show your support through becoming a Patreon. This helps us continue to keep bringing the content you love your way. It can be as little as the cost of coffee each month as you listen to the new episode. Head over to www.patreon.com/Millinery.Info to find out more. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Isabelle. Thank you so much, Isabelle, for joining me on today's podcast. It's wonderful to have you here talking hats. Congratulations on your award-winning piece for the Dutch Hat Association this year. What a fantastic honour it is to have you with us. Could you take us back to the beginning of your millinery career first? How did you become involved with hats?
Well, I always loved fashion, even when I was a child. After I graduated, I immediately started an office job. But it was very quickly noticeable that that was not my cup of tea. So I followed a lot of part-time adult educations, such as hat making, fashion design, contemporary lace, textile design. That was between the year 1995 and the year 2000. Later on, I decided to stop working and went back to secondary school. So I did my 5th and 6th secondary education again, but now into the fashion direction. After graduating, for the second time, I became independent and I made hats and clothes on demand. That time we lived in a house on the country, so not a lot of passers-by. And it was in 2007, my husband and I took the decision of buying a store in our city, and we moved. In the beginning, I did not only sold hats, but also fabrics and accessory. It was in 2014 when we renovated the shop that it became a real hat shop. So not only I do sell my own creations, but well-known brands as the famous Italian Borsalino, Panizza, Alfonso d'Este, Seeberger, Meiser, Cagnol, and last but not least, the Belgian brand Derby Sport with its flat caps. In the meantime, I followed a teacher training, and afterwards I taught modiste training in adult education in Bray. And then became Corona. Due to a combination of circumstances, I moved my workspace, which was until then at the back of the shop, to a new location in Hasselt. So I am now on 2 locations.
Oh, what a challenge.
Tina will stay a real shop, and I'm there on Tuesday, Friday, and Saturday with real opening hours. And in Hasselt, I'm on Monday, Thursday, and Wednesday. So you are welcome there on appointment. There is my working space, an area to give workshops, and an area with a base of materials. We are still renovating, so it is still not finished the way I want, how I feel it in my head. But I hope it will be finished soon.
When you bought the shop, was it already a fashion business, or did you develop your hat business from the beginning, from scratch?
No, it was something else. No, we had no hat shop in the city. So I started from
Right.
zero.
And how far away are both of those, your two locations, from each other?
By car, about 45 minutes.
Wow. Which is a long way in the Netherlands, actually.
Oh, well, one is in Vlaams-Brabant, we call it like that, and Hasselt is in Limburg. So it are two different parts of Belgium.
Belgium, yes.
Also different people. So that's a bit the difference between the two cities.
That's amazing.
Hasselt is also very famous for his mode museum. So there is a really nice mode museum. If people want to come by, just visit the mode museum.
And what style of hats did you first start making when you opened your shop?
At the beginning, I made, how do I say it? Not very spectacular hats. Just hats that people can wear every day in winter. And for occasionally, sometimes it might have been a bit bigger, but not much. And now I see that people are changing. I don't know if it has something to do with Corona, but it might be a bit bigger, a bit more expensive. So I think there is a change.
Yeah. And what's the split between, you mentioned a few of the brands that you have in stock there. What's the split between how much you make for the shop and how much other stock you bring in?
I think it's 80% other brands, because people find it, well, most of the time it's easy to choose something they already see and what they can try and what is already finished. Those 20% is people who say, I would love to have something what you make and do whatever you want. It has to be in that color and it has to go with that outfit. But at another aspect, I'm glad it's that way, because I do everything on my own. So I also need the time to make it. So that's the reason.
Has it allowed you to make different things? Having that stock on hand from the other brands, does it mean you get to make different types of hats yourself?
I do not have much time to experiment with other sizes or forms or whatever, because I do everything by hand, so it takes a lot of time to produce something.
Yes. That's a classic millinery approach.
Yeah, I think so. I think every milliner has that problem. I wish I had more hours in a day, but unfortunately it's not.
And what led you to decide to bring in those other brands?
Because I think my customers asked for it. And I think, well, in the beginning, when the shop had not only hats, there were a lot of people who asked me, oh, do you have that kind of hat or that kind of hat? And then at a certain point, I decided, well, I will skip all the accessory and all the other stuff. And I want that people know me as a hat shop. So people need the how do you say it? People need the choice, the different choice between different brands and different materials and yeah.
And so you mentioned there a little bit about your training. Who did you first start learning hat making from?
I followed a 2-year training, adult education in Hasselt, but afterwards it was very basic. And then during an open door from a hat supplier, I met Hanna Hinlikova, who was at that time living in Eindhoven. After a few phone calls with her, I took weekend classes with her during several years. After that, I was happy I found Marianne Jonkind in the Netherlands. The hunger for learning is growing, and I'm so happy with events like the London Hat Week, Hoedendag or Hat Day from the Dutch Hat Association, where you can follow master's classes with such great teachers as Ian Bennett, Bridget Bailey, Dylan Wall, Dennis Spence, and so much more. So I really love those things.
That's great. And what was the best aspect of your training? What's something that's really stood out to you as a skill or maybe lesson you've learned about business?
I think I can't remember a really highlight. For me, everything is important to learn, not only in the beginning, but even now, after all those years, I'm so happy I can follow lessons with other people, just for fun, not really with the intention, oh, I want to learn something new, but just meeting other people who has the same interests as I. That's also a highlight for me.
It's very important and a great way to network and connect with other makers.
Yes. And for me, making hats, well, it's a bit lonely. I'm in my workspace all alone. So I am happy to meet or have the opportunity to meet other people with the same interest and to talk about hats.
And it can be very solitary, working on your own, doing it all yourself, as you mentioned. It takes a lot of different skills to be able to do that. I was going to ask you about your workspace.
Until recently, I work in the back of my shop in Tienen, but the hat blocks and the materials kept growing and I needed more space. So that's the reason why I moved everything to Hasselt. But there it is stored in an intermediate space because it's not on his final destination yet, because we are renovating. And so I'm still moving boxes from one room to another room until it's finished.
What's left to go?
Well, it's finished in my head and I know how I want it, but we are not coming to that area yet. So
Yes.
renovating is a long process and it costs a lot of time and money. So, and particularly the money, that makes me, well, that's why I have to wait a little bit longer.
Yes. And do you have clients come into both of your spaces to have a consultation?
Yes, they do. It depends a bit where they live.
Mm-hmm.
And some people say, well, it's no problem. I will come to Hasselt. I will come by car, no problem. Or sometimes a bit older people, they say, oh no, I pick the nearest one. But it doesn't matter. They are welcome on both places.
And how do you decide what stock to have in each location if you run consults in both?
Well, in Tienen, I have a lot of samples and photos. And in Hasselt, they can really try it on and see and touch the material. So that's a bit the difference.
Yeah. The delicate balance.
Yeah, but Tienen is really a shop where they can see all the other hats from the other brands as well. And Hasselt, I see more as a workroom. I only have my own hats here in Hasselt.
Yeah.
So that's a bit the difference.
Great. And how has your making process changed over your career? You mentioned that you like to hand stitch a lot. Has that always been the case?
Yeah, I think it became technically more accurate. Now I'm very perfectionist. How do you say that in English? I don't know.
Yeah.
So I hope I can improve my creativity as well, because for me that's a working point. I would love to go wild on it, but I'm always a bit scary of doing that. So
And what have been some of your career highlights so far?
well, I'm very happy I won the first prize from the hat competition organized by the Dutch Hat Association. But highlights, for me, for example, receiving a flower bouquet or a thank you card for a happy customer, that is also a highlight for me when people are happy. So
Absolutely.
can't really think about a really highlight. Every day is a highlight.
Every hat is a highlight?
Yes, well, not always, but I'm going for a yes.
And when they're not being a highlight, what's your process for working through that?
Well, when I make for a client, I think it's very important to listen what they really want. I think it starts with, what does the client want? And then I build it up. We have an appointment in between so they can try it already. And then we see what direction we will go further on. And at that point, it's a yes or a no. You know what I mean? So we can change the direction or it's okay for them. But I think listening to what I want is very important. That's the first step.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So when your clients come in to see you, what process do you go through with them?
Well, it depends a bit. When it's in the winter, it's almost it's almost every time for a hat they will wear every day. So I asked to bring or to wear the coat they want to go with it, and then we're looking for the model, and we are looking for a color, and I measure their hat, and I make something, and then they will have a fitting, and then it's okay or it's not okay, and then I finish the hat. And when it's starting January, then the people come who will have a wedding or whatever, and then I hope they already have their dress and accessory, and then we will discuss what I really want, a big hat or just a fascinator or tiara or whatever. Most of the time I draw something and I send it by mail or WhatsApp or whatever, and then they say, oh yes, that's what I want, or no, or bigger or smaller or whatever, and then I start to create. In the meantime, I often send them photos of what I'm doing and which way I will go, and then they say yes or no. In between, they often come and see the creation, and then they say, yes, that's it, or change that a little bit, or not that high, or more flowers, less flowers, whatever. And if they are pleased, then I finished the hat or whatever.
Do you make a collection of hats? How do you work the pieces that you present?
No, I don't. I always say, well, for this summer, I have to make 4 or 5 pieces, and that is my collection for now. But people do always want something else. And then I think I do not have enough time to make that collection. I would rather do something else than that. Because 4 or 5 pieces, and then they're standing there in the shop, they look at it and they say, oh, they are really nice, but that's not what I had in mind. I will have something else. And they want another color, or so. No, I'm not making a collection.
I absolutely understand that it can be so challenging to decide what to make. And of course that happens. You make a piece and they go, you've made it in pink, but I will now want it all in blue. And you're like, oh, gotta start
I have
again.
to, yeah. And I think it's a good idea. And I always keep in mind, well, I'm going to do it. This season, I will try to make a little collection and make nice photos of it. And then I also can see the developing of everything year after year. But I never manage it. Unfortunately. Yeah, unfortunately.
Do you sketch every piece before you make it?
No. But my process is, and it's positive and negative, the hat must be finished in my head before I start. You know what I mean?
Yes. You know how how you're going to do every step of it.
Yes. And well, try to write down little points, first that, that it fits complete and that it's technically fits well made, all right. And I think that is a bit of a problem, that I cannot be that creative and that experimental, because it has to be finished in my head. And how will I make it before I really start?
Interesting process. Well, it's fascinating to hear how everyone approaches things differently.
I try to sketch, because I think the much I sketch, the better I will become, and practice. But yeah, sometimes I do, to give just an idea for the clients. But when I want to make something for me or just for fun, I never sketch.
You mentioned you have a teaching space. What type of classes do you have in there?
Well, I give teaching classes for a real school. And during COVID, it was not much fun. We are not allowed to teach. We had to make online classes. And then afterwards, I had not enough hours to teach there again. And the building, they broke down and things like that. So all the people asked me, oh, it's going to stop. No, can we come with you? And do you want to teach? And that's the most important reason I start teaching here in my space. So at one side, I have people who already know how to make hats. They come over on one day, and they just, they can make whatever they want. They can use my blocks and materials, and I just guide them and help them and try to teach that way, each one individually. And then at the other side, I give lessons that I say, well, that day we're going to make a winter hat, a fedora or a trilby or whatever. If you want to make that, please come over. I would love to invite other teachers in the future. But then again, I have to be patient because it's not finished yet. But when I have the space, I will go for it.
Sounds like a bit of a call out to anyone who might like to go to Belgium.
Everybody's welcome in Belgium. So nice here, nice chocolates.
And I think we should talk about your award-winning piece. You won the Dutch competition. Could you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, after receiving the materials, I had to think it over and over again. So at the end, I almost had not enough time to actually make my hat. For me, it was important that I used the 3 different vintage materials: the lace, racello, and veling. Nothing more, nothing less. Technical, it had to be very good. And I wanted to make something new. Something unrecognizable. Because sometimes you see hats and you immediately recognize the style or technique from another miller. So that was something I wanted to avoid.
Yes.
And I was inspired with a painting from a hat in the book Hats by Madame Paulette. She was Paris queen of millers, and she was born in 1900. So our hats were worn by people like Marlene Dietrich, Audrey Hepburn, Princess Grace of Monaco, and the Duchess of Windsor. So I really love that kind of style, atmosphere. So yeah. So I took that painting and gave it a swirl.
A great description. And so with the competition, you when everyone registered, the theme was vintage materials. Everyone got a bundle of materials from a vintage stock.
Yeah.
What materials did you get?
Well, that lace and cello and feeling I used in the hat, I thought, oh my God, what I'm going to do with that. It was also a challenge because I did not really use those materials. And well, we get an amount of materials, but not enough to really experiment with it. So it had to be correct from the first time. So as I was a bit afraid of ruining them, because what to do then? But yeah, I think I love those materials, but I am not intent to use them again for customers, for instance.
I understand that. No, I was going to ask you that. Did it inspire you to use them in another way? But it sounds like that it was a good challenge, but not the
Well,
case.
the Rascello I like. I love also. I would, when I've seen in the book from Marianne Jonkin, she also made a cap with it in combination with a leather pick. So in that way, I would love to make some, because that has a contemporary switch. But in the way it was used at that 45 or 50 years, no, I will not. Well, the lace is not that manipulative. It doesn't work the way I want it to work. That's it.
I like that reflection. It didn't do what I thought it should do.
That's it.
The pieces were on display at a gallery. Did you get to go and see them?
No, I did not. Afterward, I thought it was a bit, well, I felt a bit sad. I didn't went to the whole event, but I didn't know I was going to win. I didn't expect that. Because even when I had the slightest thing for, oh, maybe I'm with the 3 first winners, then I would go, but I really didn't expect it. So, well, maybe next time again, then I will go.
And with that piece being so different to the other ones that you've made, how did your clients react to that? Did you get any feedback?
Well, they said, well, of course, you make such lovely things. And I thought, oh, don't lie to me. Well, I am not good to things like that, you know. Some people make a hat and it wins every time. But I know from me, I'm not good in yeah. No, I'm not good in that. That's maybe the reason why I do not often make a hat for a competition. Because I always think a hat competition, well, it has to be whoa. You know what I mean? Something whoa. And I'm not good in making things like whoa.
So what inspired you to enter this year or this competition?
Well, I see it as a challenge. I have to come out of my comfort zone. Not even for I have to win or no, just to take the time to do something else and think out of the box. And that whole process is also important for me. Not even that competition. Well, I'm glad I won the competition, but I think that is for me not the most important process, because when there is no competition, I would never use those materials and think what to do with it. And that whole process, yeah, I need that challenge sometimes, I think. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's why I like to enter as well. It's really interesting to see. Yes, there are some people who make some amazing winning pieces, but you've got to be really, it can be a challenge for yourself and be happy with what you've made and put forward. That's kind
Yes.
of the win.
Yeah, and also
The
you
real
have
win.
that deadline, and it has to be finished. That is also a whole challenge for me.
What was the most challenging part of when you were constructing it?
It has a big brim, and I thought, what if it doesn't stay the way I want it be? I wanted to have it like that.
Mm.
If it didn't work that way, I had maybe not enough material to make another one. So there I was a bit afraid. It has to go correct from the first time.
Yeah.
Because there was a really big bow on it.
Yes.
And I had to cut it on the bias double. So I thought, oh, what if I don't like it? I do not have enough lace to make a new one. So yeah, that was a bit of a challenge.
It's nerve-wracking. So the question I like to finish on is, what's coming up for you next? What's a project you're looking forward to working on?
Well, I hope I can go on the direction I'm going on now. I want to grow. I want to go. I want to become bigger and better. In Belgium are not that much milliners. So I hope I can work on that.
Inspire some other creatives.
Yeah. And I hope, because there are a lot of crafts who disappear because people always want it has to be less expensive and faster and more. And I hope I can let live our craft or keep that alive. I think that is an important goal for me, and that people know me and that they know from you can follow workshops or master classes with me or other milliners, whatever, that they are here welcome for maybe buying materials. Also on that point, I would love to grow, because that's also not easy, find right and nice materials. So yeah, I think that's the direction I want to go on.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you so much, Isabelle, for joining me for today's podcast. It's been so lovely to speak hats with you.
And thank you for inviting me. It was my pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this Millinery.Info episode with Isabelle. Thank you to our wonderful podcast sponsors for making this episode possible: Judith M. Millinery Supply House, Hat Academy, Louise McDonald Milliner, Best Western Apollo Bay Motel and Apartments, House of Dawn, Hatters Millinery Suppliers, Lifted Millinery, Be Unique Millinery, Hats by Lico, Hat Mags, and Millinery Australia. You can find a link to each of these businesses in our show notes, either in your podcast app or through our website. I'd like to invite you to head over to www.patreon.com/Millinery.Info and find out how you can support as I continue to bring you this content you hear each month. I'm your host, Lauren Ritchie. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode, and I look forward to talking hats with you again soon.